Alright, so 50 Cent has come out and basically been like he's not gonna make another season of BMF because of his problems with Big Meech. And in doing so, he also exposed Lil Meech by showing their DMs where he seems to not respect Rick Ross, but kind of defends what his father did by saying like, well, at the end of the day, Rick Ross did give him the funds, so can't really get mad at him for being in a picture with him. Now, 50 Cent and Rick Ross have been in a war for like more than 15 years now, and 50 Cent's one of those people that literally will do anything he can to make sure whoever he hates has the worst life possible. And on some very deep level, I don't want to say I respect it, but I respect it. 50 Cent himself is a non-reputable person. Like, he's not somebody that I would want to look up to or wants to give that much credits to. But that being said, the people he's beefing with are just as horrible as him, usually. So I can't really get too mad at him for having this scorched earth policy on them. But that BMF show being cancelled is also not the worst thing I can think of. I'm not saying the show is trash or anything, but I've been watching the show since it came out, and 50 Cent has this thing where he has to make a show about drug dealers. He has this weird obsession with the idea of somebody coming from the gritty streets or being a wealthy son of a drug dealer and then selling drugs themselves. And I understand it's a sort of, well, I kind of came from that, that's all I know thing. But at the same time, it's like, you want to do this every single time? Every single show has to be about somebody selling drugs and how they have to traffic drugs the best way possible. And BMF is interesting. At the end of the day, it is an interesting show. I'm not going to take that away from it. But the acting for some of these characters is a little unacceptable. They have these celebrity rappers and actors come in and do guest appearances on these 50 Cent shows. BMF sticks out in mind because there's a certain scene where I don't know how they got approved for actual air, because it's just some of the worst acting I've seen in my life. But that being said, Lil Meech himself and the guy who plays Southwest T, they're fine. Like, the whole family, like the main family, they're all fine actors. Like, their acting performance isn't trash. Like I said before, the show itself is interesting enough for me to be cool with it. But another problem I have with the show is the fact they have these stupid, lame, motivational speeches before they do their drug sales. They go like, when you work really hard for what you want, you have to make that happen. And then when that does happen, you can be who you want to be. And I'm like, what are you people talking about? You're selling drugs. You're not doing anything productive in the world. What I really hate about these online activists, in a lot of senses, is that they have all this problem for people who sell loans to people who handle mortgages and people who do insurance and people who rent out properties, because their whole job relies on you skimping out on people. And I agree with them. Those jobs are necessarily, they involve you making sure people have the short end of the stick. They involve you screwing over people. So I am fully on board with the villainization of these careers. However, the same people who cry all day about people who rent out stuff or people who work in insurance have some weird, well, I know they sold cocaine, but they came from the streets, so it's not really... What are you talking about? These drug dealers literally rely on people being addicted to drugs, the worst type of drugs, before they make any money. And I'm not talking about people who sell weed either. Like, if you sell weed, I don't care. I'm talking about people who sell stuff like crack. People who sell stuff like heroin. These people do it specifically to make sure people get addicted to it because that makes them more money. How is this not the scummiest thing possible? And even aside from that, they shoot and kill people, but if they didn't shoot and kill people and they would just cause an increase in the murder rates, they would still be people who would necessarily need to ruin other people's lives in order to make a lot of money. And they're making a lot of money doing it. So there's no reason to respect them or try to rehabilitate their image. And there's nothing wrong with making shows about drug dealers either. Look at Narcos. In Narcos, Pablo is basically the main character, but he's also the main villain. It's so clear that he's not the cool guy. He's not the person we should be rooting for. But they also flesh out his character and make him somebody who's like not this super duper super villain. He's like a horrible person, but it's a fleshed out portrayal of a person. In all these 50 Cent shows, the drug dealer's clearly the hero. It may be like, wow, they're a little rough around the edges. They may be a little violent, but at the end of the day, there's no end of the day. These guys suck. These guys are actually people who have no concept of empathy or care for anybody else besides themselves. I totally think they should have shows about them. I am fully on board with making TV series about stuff like this, but I don't think it's cool to make them out to be some sort of hero, or, well, they didn't really have a choice or anything like that, or, well, what would you do if you're in this situation? No, they are criminals. And they're not criminals like they had a speeding ticket one time. They're criminals like they actually rely on people suffering to make their money. Another thing about the BMF show that I want to talk about a little is the fact that Lil Meech, the son of Big Meech, plays his father. And I think that's kind of cool. I will say though, when I first saw Big Meech, and I saw Lil Meech, I was like, I barely see a resemblance here. They don't look that similar to me. But then I actually saw how Big Meech looks now, and I'm like, he looks like an older version of him. So casting like that is a cool thing. I don't really mind that. I think that's kind of interesting. But now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm kind of realizing how if you're going to be the son of the guy you're playing, you're kind of going to also defend them in all their crimes. So it might be kind of tricky to make a show where this guy is played by his son, and then he also portraying as being the criminal he actually is. Might be a little conflict of interest there. And also I wanted to touch on the fact that these guys did all their dirt like decades ago. They got arrested in the mid 2000s. And despite being behind all this super criminal activity, all these drug sales and everything, they're both on a parole now. That's how the justice system works if you're rich. When you're a brokey and you go down for like a million felonies and like it's not fair that people, it's not because you're this or that. It's because you're broke. If you had a lot of money, you could commit crimes every day, and you can just get parole. You can get a lawyer that will make it clear to you that, oh, actually, what you did wasn't that bad because you didn't know it was this or that. So just know that if you're trying to commit super duper crimes, all you need is the best lawyer on your side, and you will be set for life. Like, there are people who've committed murder and the most extreme amounts of drug possession and have broken the parole multiple times. But because they are famous rappers, or because they're famous people in general, or because they're famous singers or actors, they've managed to kind of get away with everything. And every time they go on parole is another excuse, like, well, I mean, they felt the type of way about something that happened last day, so who cares? For Meech and T, it's a little different because they are rich, and that is the reason they're not in jail for life. But still, they actually got the hammer when they actually got the sentencing. It's just like now, after the pandemic and everything, it's a lot of stuff has happened where they've argued their case to be freed, and I guess the judges took it. But there have been people who do like financial stuff like Bernie Madoff, and they were never getting out. Like, there are people, like when they capture people from like foreign cartels, those guys aren't getting out ever. But when you commit crime, but you're like a domestic celebrity, then it's cool. In that case, don't worry about the whole life and thing. It's not gonna happen. So just keep that in mind whenever you think about how much you'd actually have to spend time in if you didn't have the funds first.